You're listening to China Manufacturing Decoded from the Sofeast Group. Hello, welcome back to the podcast, episode 247. Today, recording on 12th of December 2024. It's almost the end of the year. It's Adrian on hosting duty this week. And Paul Adams joins me again. Paul, who is our head of new product development and a senior engineer at the Sofeast Group. Hi, Paul. Is it too early to say happy holidays?
Well, hello, Adrian, to start with. And yeah, I guess it is a little bit because we are 110 miles an hour over here.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. I can't even think about holidays at the moment. We're just, there's so much on, which is a good thing. Let's face it. So,
yeah,
that's
kind of the difference between the West and China, right? Because as regular listeners know, I'm generally in the UK, which is where I am right now, and we are deep into sort of Christmas spirit, and all the decorations are up, and it's just everywhere. It's all pervasive. The Christmas music, it's just going crazy, right? And yeah, people are still at work, but it's kind of starting to slow down now for sure. You know how it is, right? But in China, actually not the same, because China, they got a few decorations up and stuff, but they don't really celebrate Christmas. So it's kind of just another working day. And with Chinese New Year coming, actually, in the manufacturing space, people are pretty busy right now trying to just smash through all the work before Chinese New Year, which is at the end of January.
Yes, that's right. And everybody's like pushing not for, can you deliver before Christmas? It's make sure you get everything out before the end of January, which is basically when we start the Chinese New Year. So it's a slightly different outlook on the holiday seasons. But regardless where you're coming from or listening from, happy holidays almost.
Absolutely, yeah. And we'll still be carrying on with the podcast and blog posts. So when you got some downtime over the holidays, to everybody who's listening, just catch up on some of these cool episodes. So thanks for coming back on, Paul. Good topic today, and one that I think you can shed a lot of light on, right? Recently, Renaud and I were talking about this blog post from a smart bear. I'll leave the link to it. And the blog post is titled, "Your Customers Hate MVPs, Make SLC Instead," right? So we're basically talking about MVPs versus SLCs today. And if you're listening wondering, well, hang on a minute, what are MVPs and what are SLCs? What are these guys talking about? Well, this is an opportune moment now, Paul, for you to jump in and give a bit of an overview to just start us off.
Yeah, I was just thinking this, the industry is very full of acronyms. And this the things that it is talked about a lot. I'm going to start with the MVP, basically this has been around for a while, and we're not the owners on that. And it basically started up with a guy called Eric Riese. I might be saying his name right, and he was the guy that really started up the lean startup. And this was really all about getting products to market as soon as possible without getting all of the features or anything that you really, really put down in your initial design idea or concept to get early feedback. Okay, so that's basically where it comes from. So the MVP means minimal viable products. Okay, and that's basically getting, like I say, getting that product out such that you can gather information back from selected customers, let's say, and learn what they are saying about the products that you have put out. And therefore, you are validating your design concept or the concept of the product that you want to put out ultimately and eventually. Okay, so that is what the MVP is all about. And a lot of people are saying it's the minimum viable product with just enough features, right, that get the product doing what it's supposed to do. Okay. But a lot of people get this wrong. Okay. And where they go wrong is they focus on the minimal without the viable. Okay. And this is a big issue when it comes to, I'm going to primarily focus on hardware products or electromechanical or consumer electronics type of products.
Yeah.
This can go for software and apps. We'll talk about later on that everybody's heard of. Okay, so you can sort of relate to what we mean with respect to minimal viable products and testing the market. And I think this is what it's all about, testing the market with respect to, is my product okay? Is my idea viable? And this is where that viability comes into play. But a lot of people miss that out and they focus on the minimal aspect. And again, I'll go into that a little bit later on. So that's the MVP side of it. I just want to introduce what the acronyms are to start with before we get to Adrian. SLC. I like this one. Now, this is all about simple, lovable, and complete. Okay. This is a really nice one. It's like simple, lovable, and complete. And this is very similar to the MVP. So, minimal is simple. Okay, fair enough. Viable, lovable. Well, that's where we got a little bit of a difference. And the big one is the complete. Okay, so this is where the SLC framework really steps up from the MVP framework. Okay, so that's where we have a little bit of differences where we could actually think, you know what, I've heard of the MVP. Now I'm learning about the SLC, and I think hopefully when we get to the end of the podcast, everybody will be able to understand that there are options. Yeah. And the SLC is potentially, in some cases, right, a better option to go with, because it has that completeness, which we'll talk about in more detail later on, about the first product you're putting out there to make sure that the product is still viable, such that you can go into sort of further iterations of the design and then launch a product that is, one, going to meet the customer expectations, but two, accepted to a wider audience because it's already been validated by a set of sort of consumers that have already seen it and validated the complete set of features that you want to validate and push forward. Does that make sense?
And this kind of the difference between MVP and SLC, what we're going to discover as we go along is that it kind of requires a mindset shift. And as you're mentioning, that changing kind of approach may suit some businesses more than others. But what we're not exactly saying is that the MVP is bad or the SLC is great and that's the only option. And again, this is going to become clear because I think they both have their place for sure. With the MVP, is it fair to say that this has kind of been the go-to framework for maybe hardware startups or smaller businesses or something like that? Because I don't know, I'm thinking like, big brands, if they're bringing out a new product, that doesn't feel exactly like an MVP to me. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they actually are kind of like a stealth MVP. Like, if we often use Apple as a benchmark, right? The original iPhone 1, was that really an MVP? It was extremely feature rich, but it was obviously the first iteration.
Exactly. Well, if we could look back on it now, you could obviously say that was clearly an MVP. However, who's to know? But, you've got the idea right with respect to, you make sure you've got a product that has got enough features that will allow users to interface or interact or get the job done. In the iPhone cases, you had a lot of features were very, very different to Android back then, and at least still now, which were very, very different. And that was one of the things that's like, hold on a minute, it's like, I don't even know how to use this phone. It's so alien to me. It's very, very different. But once you get to using it, you think, oh, that's quite intuitive. Oh, I like this feature, but I'm not sure about that feature. And I guess that's where they were going, or anybody goes with their first product when they go to launch, when we're talking about the minimal viable products.
Mm.
And it's really, looking at those features to make sure that as a designer or as a manufacturer of your own brand, that you are putting the features in there that are useful, that they can deliver some value to the end user or the end customer. And basically that's what it's all about, getting the product out there. It's no point in selling a product that is useless to everybody.
No.
We've got the widgets and all the rest of it, but you know what I mean. It needs to validate. And again, I want to go on to some of the things that people do wrong later on. And this is one of the things that I want to discuss is the feature richness or lack of features, whichever way you go, is really where we need to take that fine balance when we're looking at let's say the first product you put out, whether that is an MVP or the SLC version of that product.
Okay. So I have another just small question about the MVP before perhaps you can go on to give an example of one, right? But is it the case that the MVP is arguably more useful for the business releasing the product than it might be for the actual customers?
That's a good question, Adrian. I like that. And the answer is clearly, it depends. Well, that's like, I say that, because, some companies may actually hit the nail on the head and get this absolutely perfectly correct and launch something and get all of the feedback and everybody's in a win-win situation. However, you did mention at the start, that's not always the case. And, it could be the case where the customer or the end user does hate the MVP, which was one of the sort of the statements on the article that you mentioned to start with. And that is often the case. So, you've got to look at if the company releasing the product goes to market as quickly as possible, and some people have reasons to do that, become the first into sort of a new niche or whatever, then they may miss the market. They may miss the target, let's say, with respect to what they're trying to attract or get validated from the end user or the customer. So that's a very difficult thing to look at if you are the first in the market, let's say. But again, we're looking at what the customer is looking for. The company or they really need to understand what they're offering. And a lot of people don't understand the market or they don't understand the customer, and they self-focus on the product itself, thinking they know what the customer wants. They build the product anyway and get that out to market regardless. Okay. So in that case, it's not a smart thing for the customer for the company to actually launch that product as an MVP or any other version of the product at all, because they haven't done a background research. Okay. So that's the thing now.
Okay. Shall we talk about an example? Let's try and visualize what an MVP would be, perhaps. Do you have an example for us?
Yeah, I did mention earlier, I want to bring this to the basics. And there's one company out there that everybody's heard of. Now, this is a software app. Okay, so it's not exactly what I said to start with, to try and keep it on to a consumer electronics side of thing. But the example I want to bring to everybody's attention is AirBNB. Okay, this is a very simple app. Okay, the idea is fantastic when you think about it. However, this all started off with the founders having a great idea, but they wanted to validate the idea before they went and spent loads of money on advertising and app development and stuff like this. So they basically tried to rent out their own house online, whatever they were doing. They had a very, very simple app such that the people could view the apartment or the house. They could have a look at the bedrooms, et cetera, and everything like this. And all of a sudden they were finding people wanted to rent their place, for a weekend or a couple of days or a week here, a week there. And I thought, hold on a minute, there's something in this. In other words, they've validated the idea without spending too much money on expensive advertising or websites and stuff like this. And it was very, very minimalist. So, and the same goes for Amazon. If you look at Amazon, that model there, Jeff Bezos started off selling books. Look where it is now. It took about an MVP that has gone, to the extreme, let's say. And there's a lot of other examples out there like this. But I just wanted to bring it down to the ground with respect to what people can visualize, what a founder or a business thought of to start with. In other words, that concept, that idea that somebody had, and how do we move forward without going bankrupt to start with or missing the target? And this is the key thing here. And needs to validate that very quickly, and they've done that and thought, we know we're onto something here. Let's move forward. And again, they didn't, go into the stratosphere on day two. It's everything is step by step, and the next stage would need to be validated too, and on and on. And that same goes for any product really. If you're going to go, through that step, from consumer electronics to, the AirBNB app, let's face it.
Well, we're talking about the MVP because I know Renault's spoken about it in the past on the podcast. We've written about it collectively. I mean, you've spoken about it. Damn, we make these things for some of our customers as well. Like, Renault has said that, sometimes it's better to go with an MVP or at least an early stage kind of product iteration than to get bogged down into trying to pack in so many features or more advanced functionalities, because there are benefits and drawbacks to getting to market earlier and actually starting to pick up those sales and to get user feedback and to do all of those things that can only happen once you've got a tangible product that's actually physically able to be bought. So, I mean, I totally get why an MVP is good. I suppose one of the big sticking points is it's more about the minimal word that's being used, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to like the flaws of this concept.
It is, because the viable means, so is it viable? You're trying to get validation because of that, but you need to put something out. And that's where the first part comes in. It's the minimal aspect. In other words, like, how minimal do you go? But if you've got a product specification that is as long as your arm, that's not exactly minimal.
No.
But you cut that down to, I'm just going to launch the product instead of 100 features. I'm just going to push it out with 2 features. And if you pick the wrong features to actually launch with or get validated, again, you're going to miss the target that you're trying to aim for from a long-term perspective. So you've got to be very careful from that. And this is where the minimal comes into play. Well, let me rephrase that. If the products you're pushing out is incomplete, okay? And one of those things that we look at is that if you know you're going to launch a product, you need to make sure that you're selecting the correct features in order to push out. And there's no need to have the additional features, which are sometimes, let's face it, nice to have. They're not essential for the function of the product itself. Okay. Can opener, an electric can opener, for example, what does it need to do? It needs to open a can. Ultimately, it needs to, once the can opener has detached the top section, i.e. the sealed lid, it's going to be held with a magnet. The handles are going to be a comfortable grip. It's going to be a wireless charger. Is all of that necessary to actually prove the concept of the electric can opener? No. What is? It's the cutting mechanism and the motor strength or the speed of the cutter of the product itself. So we need to actually understand, and this is where working with a good engineering or a consultant or a contract manufacturer that's got some experience in some of these things really, really helps. If you haven't got your own team, it's really important that you actually work with a competent engineering team that can help you do that. But one of them I've got down here, Adrian, is it's really about getting that MVP product that doesn't sell and the company runs out of money before they get the chance to launch the next product. Now, what I mean by that is a lot of people are focused on getting a product out to market as soon as they can with whatever features they deem to think there is the right thing to push out into the market to get validated. In other words, get that feedback in order to say, right, okay, we're on the right tracks now. And a lot of people focus too much on that, and they push the features up, in other words, from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, and they will focus on fitting the magnets to the electric can opener and making sure the grip handles are smooth and comfortable and correct fitting for left hand, right hand, and all the rest of it. And they spend so much time on this, what they're thinking is the MVP, and they do some marketing, they get it out there, and all of a sudden it's like, we've missed the target, but we've spent all the money on developing. We should have pared back a bit, and now we've run out of money. The budget's gone, which is, again, everything's a fine balance with respect to running a new product development program, regardless of what the product is. And the MVP is, and it has been, like you said, the go-to methodology in order to validate a product as early as possible, such that you've hit the target correctly with respect to making sure that you are providing added value to the customer in the niche that you're looking at, which is key.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, I think that rounds off talking about the MVP for the moment. Shall we move on to the SLC?
Love it. Or lovable, as they say.
Yeah, it's not one of the words you normally associate with sort of manufacturing topics. Lovable as a keyword, right? But actually, as we're going to discover, this becomes pretty important. And when we compare the SLC to the MVP, you're like, oh yeah, okay, so yeah, how lovable is the MVP? And the answer is potentially not very, depending on how it's been done. But anyway, I won't digress into that. Let's let you. But the SLC, I suppose let's start off by just talking about this in more detail. It is 3 concepts: simple, lovable, complete. Let's go through those, please.
Yeah, sure. You're right. It's just to reiterate, a simple, lovable, and complete is that each of those has its own special area of focus, let's say. So the simple, and because of the complexity of things, can be relatively difficult. You need to understand what you can put out there and build quickly, okay, in order to get a product into the market, into your target market's hand, okay? That way you can learn quickly, get the feedback quickly, make the modifications to the product that you're planning on launching to the mass public, and then you'll go forward with the correct answers. Okay. And is that the minimal? Yeah, pretty much so. So what I was saying earlier is a simple, minimal, they sort of very, very similar. They sort of go hand in hand. But the lovable and the completeness of the SLC framework, that's where we start to see a little bit of difference. Okay. So let's have a look at the lovable aspect. Didn't want to compare this to the MVP, the Bible bit. Well, that's very black and white. It's very cold, let's say. Lovable is a very warm thing. And this is where the lovable aspect of this framework comes into play. If you're putting out a product that is rough around the edges, let's say, for lack of a better term, and it's not very nice, aesthetically not very pleasing, and it's not very appealing to anybody, it's not very lovable. Okay. And that's what people want. What they want to see is something that is really cool. They want to see something really nice. It's the first impressions. Okay. I always come back to the first impressions when I'm thinking about the lovable aspect of a, consumer electronics, let's say. Yeah. It's got to look good. It's like, oh, that's cool. I'm using this product. It's more, someone's more likely to provide the feedback that you're asking for on something that looks pretty cool. Okay. Regardless of what features you've included in your first product that you're pushing out, if it looks cool and it looks nice, it's going to be lovable. And that's basically the concept behind the lovability in the SLC framework. It's got to look good. And people want to be able to say, yeah, I want to test this. This is really cool. As opposed to, no, it's, not interested in that. Doesn't even look good. Which brings you to the completeness and the lovability and the completeness. This is where it's very different to the MVP, because the viable product is just words. There's nothing behind it. The completeness here is it does what it says on the tin. It has to be complete. So what we're trying to do here in our early adopter products that we're sending out for validation of the design, the concept, is that your features need to be complete. Okay. I talked about a can opener earlier. And I mentioned that the key things to that is it needs to be able to open up the tin. So therefore the cutting device needs to be spot on. The speed of the motor, the power of the motor, these are all important things. But with the MVP, we're sending out something a little bit rough around the edges. We said that we weren't worried about the grip and the handle. We weren't worried about the magnet holding the tin such it doesn't fall into your can of soup or whatever you're opening. So with this framework, with the SLC, we would actually be looking at the completeness. However, that may not necessarily be the final production intent that we're going to launch with on the final version. We may include some soft grips, but they may not be injected molded, for example. There may be something taped on, or not, it's not taped on, but, a simpler form of what we're intending. The magnet may be there, but it may not be the final thing. And the key thing is to make sure that you understand what you're pushing out. Make sure you let your customers know what they are receiving. Okay, I think that's a key feature, and that goes with the MVP and this. We need to make sure that you let your customers know exactly what they are receiving. In other words, don't make any false claims with respect to, this tin opener will, heat your food up for you as well. Clearly not the case. So, you can see the difference where minimal viable product is talking about minimal features, nothing else. And this is where trying to push that framework, sometimes products miss the mark, because they're not getting all of the feedback or the feedback that they should and looking for. It just doesn't come. Whereas this new SLC framework allows you to push out an early version of the products, which is a similar representation of the final product design intent. Okay, which will allow you to get really good feedback with respect to, I like the grips, but I'm left-handed, and my husband's right-handed, and it's better suited for him. Something to take into consideration instead of no grips whatsoever. And again, that falls into the original one. The MVP is not really lovable either, because it's rough around the edges. It's steel handles and it's sharp and it's not very good, etc. You know where I'm coming from. So you can see the difference between the simple, lovable, and completeness versus just minimal. Because you're looking to validate, which is your viability, and it's the product is a product. You send out the product. So the MVP, the P part of that is sort of redundant, really, because of course you're going to send out your product. So does that cover what you think? Does that help you understand where we are from the SLC?
Yeah. Myself, yeah, and hopefully the listeners too, of course. But I mean, as a consumer, I'm trying to just put on my consumer hat here and step away from hosting for a moment. But like, if you gave consumers the choice, if you said you can either buy a minimum viable product or an SLC, so something that's, that's simple, lovable, and complete, I think the consumers would say, well, yeah, I'll take the SLC, please, because it just sounds more appealing. And in some ways, I suppose it is, because, and I think the really key words here are the minimum or minimal from the MVP, and the complete from the SLC. Lovable, important as well, right? Because, your MVP, it's getting you to market very, very quickly. As you've said, it's probably going to be a bit rough around the edges. It's workable. It's okay. Is that a very appealing product for customers? I mean, it helps you test the market. It helps you get feedback. It seems to me almost like it's kind of more of it's a branch of the product validation more than a real kind of product launch, sort of. I don't know if that's making any sense.
I think you hit the nail on the head with that last statement there, Adrian. It is part of the validation process of the new product development program or sort of overall arching development stages. And it not really meant for, is my product really adding a lot of value? Is it meeting all of the functionality that the customers are going to love? And is it going to provide me as a product developer or owner the correct information that I need to make a design change or a decision with respect to, is this product going to work? Is my business going to work? Based upon the product that I've sort of got as a concept. So,
but that's not to say that the MVP is bad, right? Actually, I think that it has positives and negatives, but I don't want to put too much of a negative spin on it, because we're not suggesting that you're going to be putting out a product that's, scrap or anything like that. It is a viable product that people can buy and use, right? If it wasn't, that would be, it would be crazy, right? So is it, maybe it's faster to create an MVP than an SLC, which is one of the benefits. Would that be fair to say?
I would say so. Yes.
Yeah.
I think you're right there. Simply because you're not focused with the MVP. It's really getting that initial validation from the minimal set of features that you're putting out there.
Yeah.
Now, say that there's horses for courses. There is no right or wrong answer to which framework you actually come down on.
Yep.
And it's really both of these frameworks have their own place. And if you're looking for something, and again, I used the word before. It depends on what the product is. If it's more of an industrial product, then maybe people don't need to love it. They're just like looking for a full feature set, and does it cut quickly? Does it do this efficiently? Whereas if it's more of a consumer electronics type of product, then maybe it needs to have the fluffy edges around it type of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's definitely that there is room for both of these frameworks while you are developing your product. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So the SLC is kind of more of the newer kid on the block, right? So if we talk about how to create an SLC, I understand there's kind of a framework that you can lead everybody through.
Yeah, there is. There's some basic steps. I think everybody's sort of familiar with the MVPs. Talked about that one. But let's talk about the steps that really should be followed, but what's included in the SLC sort of framework itself. So, we talked about functionalities. That's the core aspect of this, and well, for both of them really, is you really need to identify what functions you are actually going to include in your SLC. Okay, that's the first step. And then you need to look at the lovability aspects of what elements you're going to include that really make a difference to the product itself. It's no point in having, pink fluffy dice hanging from whatever it is if it has zero functionality, or if it's, you just think, oh, it's going to look nice. No, that's not what we're talking about. The lovability, like we said before, is making sure that when the customer or the early adopter gets the product in their hand, they go, oh man, this is cool. I like this. That's that lovability aspect, as opposed to, yeah, sure, Mr. sort of supplier, I'll test your product for you and give you some feedback. That's no problems. It's a different mentality, different feedback you're going to get. So you need to incorporate what lovability you're going to include and what those elements are going to be, and how you're going to include those into the product itself. Now, the next part is a common factor, and there's gathering user feedback. You clearly need that from whatever framework you're in, trying to validate the features, the product, and anything else that the consumer or the user is willing to provide to you, because all feedback is positive, regardless of whether it's positive or negative feedback, because negative feedback could actually allow you to look at your product itself, look at the design, the concept, and go, actually, this is a common thread here. I'm getting this negative feedback from several people. Therefore, it makes sense for me to change the design and eliminate that common thread from a negative feedback. So that's really a key thing. And then once you've updated that, again, we're talking about a common theme on both of these platforms is updating the version 2 or 1.1, whatever the case may be, is beta testing, and getting the product out there to a wider audience. The more people you've got providing feedback, the more people you've got using your product, the better the data points you're going to get back in order for you to validate the product, the features, and the specifications can actually be solidified, and such that you can get a real handle on what is actually needed in the general public, in the outside world, let's say. So that's really important, getting that information back from beta testers, which is generally a greater audience volume than your initial 10, 20, 30 sort of early adopters, or whatever wherever the numbers are, depending on what field or industry or niche you're launching into, obviously. So that's basically where we are from that. Then we're going to be looking at making sure that the functionality and the simplicity is there without overcomplicating the product. And that is really sitting down and analyzing all of the data points that you've got back. In other words, all of the feedback that you've had and received from anybody that's using the product, from functionality point of view, the lovability point of view, the soft fluffy dice, or the soft grip hands on your can opener, for example, and understanding what really makes sense without, again, overcomplicating, filling up that feature list to, as long as your arm. That's the last place where you want to be. Okay, so that's basically the framework of setting up the SLC, which is not too dissimilar, let's face it, to the MVP, whereas the MVP really focuses on minimal features. That's it, minimal features. And then it's really trying to validate those features that you have selected to push out into the market.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Okay, that's good. And as you've mentioned, not massively dissimilar to the MVP, just requiring kind of a shift in thought on what the approach is. So a slight change in the focus, not the thought. Are there any tools and methods that would work well with the principles involved in creating an SLC that you can share?
Well, yeah, there's a couple of things that come to mind, Adrian, that we use or I've used in the past. And that's one of the big ones is really looking for feedback loops and fast iterative changes on the design such that you can sort of correct any negativity coming back or any issues that you think, this is, like I said earlier, there's a common thread from a negative point of view. Everybody's complaining about the same thing. All right, let's get that in there, get that back out. Now, if it's consumer electronics and that consumer electronics has software or firmware, that's relatively easy if the product has the capability of doing over-the-air updates. You can actually say, reach out to the end users and the customers that you've reached out to. Say, okay, then we hear what you're saying. We're going to send you an update via the air. Just download it via the app or whatever the case may be. And please carry on using it once you've downloaded and updated the products. So that's one way through this. But using the sort of the open loop or the feedback loop, it is really, really key to getting quick responses looked at, whether they're positive or negative. Now, if there's a positive thing, then clearly that's solidified the design concept. Okay, this feature is like everybody loves it. We're keeping that one in. Negative feedback. Okay, then so everybody's complaining about this. We need to change that. But then once you've changed it, you need to revalidate that. And again, this is why it's called a sort of an open loop. The loop comes back and around, which is really, really important. And this is all done during the what we call the design stage or the design thinking aspect of it. So you're thinking about how to design something that offers a feature. So that feature has its own set of parameters. Those parameters then come up with the specification or everything links together. You push that out for validation. Right? You get the feedback. You either lock it down or make the change. And that is the ongoing loop or that cycle with respect to, until you've locked down every single feature, i.e. specification for that product, at which point then you know that you can move forward into the next stage of moving the product into more of a solid mass market production design, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
So this is key. This is really, really key to, it basically is called, keep your finger on the pulse with respect to the body that you've put a product out to, making sure you're reaching out to everybody, making sure that some people out there are not going to give you as much feedback as others. Some people are going to give you zero feedback. Some people are just like, oh yeah, I'll test your product. I've got a free product. I'm all good. That's the nature of the business we're in. We can't get 100% feedback where necessary, but having that loop, that feedback loop is key and is critical to, I would say, not just here for the SLC, the MVP, but in general, when you're developing a product, as a designer, you need to be talking to your tool maker. The tool maker needs to feed back information to the designer. And whatever system you're in, whatever phase of the development you're in, you're always having this feedback loop. But it's really, really key here. Once you get to this stage, when you're putting products out into the market, it's absolutely critical that you get some feedback in order to validate the design, i.e. the feature, i.e. the specification.
Yes. Yeah, very good point. Okay, good. Before we close, I think listeners might be thinking, okay, I'm up for this. I want to create an SLC now. That's going to be the path that I want to take, right? However, there are some common problems that should probably be avoided that would serve as a very helpful reminder to anybody thinking, okay, it's time to create an SLC, yeah? So to try and help keep people on the right track, Paul, can you go through some of these so we know what to look out for?
I can, and these issues really come up with people that are not even considering running an MVP or an SLC. And they just think, well, I'm just going to go ahead and design a product and just launch it and go for it. And some of the common problems that we see time and time again is what I call design specification stuffing. Okay. And they think, oh, this is a good feature. I'll put that in there. We'll see that will come through. And then a month later, they'll go, I just want to add something else. And by the time they're finished, the product is so complicated. And the more complexity you build into a product, the more chance of an error creeping in, or the product not working correctly, or you over provide for the end user such that the product is no longer adding value. Okay, so this is a design specification stuffing, what I call. Big mistake. Try not to do that, team. Try not to do that. Another one that's it comes to mind is overthinking and overanalyzing the design, such to the point you never ever get to the point where you're going to launch something. Because you're always looking at something that maybe I've got the wrong color. Maybe the shape of the buttons is wrong, and you're overanalyzing everything. At some point, you need to draw a line in the sand or put a stake in the ground and say, you know what, let's just launch. Now, whether that be, whether we're going down the MVP road, whether we're going down the SLC road, or we've skipped all of that and just go, you know what, I'm just going to go with a full specification where we are. You need to draw the line at some point. Stop overanalyzing, stop overthinking what the customer could or potentially perceive as, are they going to like it? Is it going to work? Is it going to be accepted? So we see that a lot as well. Right? That's one of the things that comes to mind. And I talked about a minute ago, I've got another one in my mind as well, is trying to design everything that the customer needs to the nth degree. And this really goes hand in hand with overthinking, overanalyzing the design. If you're trying to design something, so I'm looking at in front of me now, I've got the air conditioning remote control. Anything it's pretty basic, but if you're the owner of this product and you think, no, it's, I'm not particularly happy with the aesthetics of the buttons. Therefore, I know that the customers will not be aesthetically pleased with the look of the product. And you just go around this, ever decreasing circle with respect to trying to redesign and over-design something that doesn't really need it. Let's face it. So that's another thing. And again, there's another one that goes hand in hand in here, is trying to preempt what the customer wants without validating that. And this really does come square bang in what we've been talking about today, is the MVP. Choose one, MVP or SLC. Choose one, because you need to validate the product. You need to validate the idea. Don't try and double guess what the customer wants without even talking to anybody. Okay, because you'll get let's face it, some customers will be 100% in line with what you want, but what's the percentage? 2, 3, 4% of what you think your market share is. You need to validate the product and the design before you actually push it out. Don't try and double guess or preempt what the customer wants. Okay.
Yeah.
Another one, I've been talking about this for 20 plus years, Adrian, is design scope creep. Okay. This one here will kill you. If you're doing a design development product on your own, or whether it be a contract manufacturer or a consultant you've got in, get your specification down with respect to what you want the product to do. Okay. And at some point you need to freeze that. Once it's frozen, it's frozen. Time and time again, I've seen this throughout, and it's like, they come back, I just want to do a little bit more, or I just want to reach the moon if we can. And it's having these design scope creep, depending on what phase of the product. And some people come in and go, we're just at tooling. You know what? Can we just add another feature? Yeah, sure, no problems. That's going to cost you another $25,000 for a new tool. And it's some people don't actually understand the implications of a very, very small change they've got in their mind with respect to putting it on paper, getting it in CAD, and then go, oh, what's the cost of that? Sometimes it can be astronomical. But the point is, you'll never get to market if you keep on pushing the design scope out and out and out. And this is basically called creep. And it's called creep because all these little changes on top of little changes make a massive impact at the end of the day. So please stop doing a design scope creep, people. Please.
Yes. Yeah, it just paralyzes the project.
It does. It really does. And I've got another one here. Yeah, I've got another one. Insufficient testing. I've seen this time and time again as well. People go and build the first product and actually put it out to a few people, 10 or 20 people that they know, or, friendly customers they've reached out to, and yeah, everything's all good. But they haven't actually done any real testing, real performance testing. Now, again, that can kill you if you get into mass production of thousands and thousands of products. The process that we follow, we've got an MPI product, or the new product introduction process. And part of that is, once you get to the pre-production stage, we make a statement and make it very, very clear to our customers that the pre-production is there to validate that the product goes together. It goes down the line. We've got the process correct from a work instruction point of view, but it will not identify all of the errors that you will find in mass production. This is just statistics. So sending a product out without really testing it, I'm really testing it for reliability, performance, in extended temperatures or extended times, extreme limits either end. It's a recipe for disaster. It really is. But some people are in a rush to launch their product and get their product out as soon as possible, and they skip key stages through the design and development stage. And this is a key thing. So make sure that you listen. If you're doing the MVP, or if you're doing the SLC, make sure you listen and analyze all of that data. I mentioned that before. Make sure you analyze all of that data that you get and use that, and use it wisely. And once you've got your product validated, your design is frozen, your specifications locked down, make more products and put them into test. Put them long-term test, reliability testing, get all of the testing you can done. Because if you don't do that, you push your product out to the market, game over. Simple as that.
That's not what we want. No, it's not what we want at all. Right.
No, not. So I'm hoping that these are the common mistakes that we see and experienced. So, it's hopefully you'll listen to that and go, I'm sort of guilty of some of that.
Well, it's all about
No, I'm not. I'm actually going to follow that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about learning, isn't it? It's all about knowing what to look out for. So good advice there. Right, let's wrap this thing up then. So quick recap about the differences between the MVP and SLC, and maybe some of the key takeaways for the listener from this episode, please, Paul.
Yeah, sure. So let's go back to the MVP. The minimal viable product is all about getting a set of minimal number of features on a product that you're going to validate. If you're going to do this, please do it correctly, making sure that you have the correct features built into the product that you want validated and you want answers for, such that you can lock down your specification and move forward. Now, this is not all about going to mass production with millions and millions of units. This is launching the first product of your brand, of your range, or your product of your company, just to make sure that you're out there. It is 9 times out of 10, there's going to be a version 2 comes along. But there's one of the things that I mentioned earlier is procrastination. If you're over-analyzing everything, even on the negative feedback or the positive feedback you get, if you over-analyze anything, you never push anything out to the market, you'll never be in the market. Yeah. So it's really a case of getting the product out there first to validate the product as opposed to nothing at all. But if you're doing the MVP, make sure you select and include the correct number of features that is going to give the customer added value. Okay, so that's where we are with the MVP. From an SLC point of view, it's a slightly different take. I would say the S is very, very similar and goes hand in hand with the M, which is simplicity. Okay, keep it simple. Yes, keep the features in there that you want, which is basically what you need to validate. It's the features that you need to validate on the product itself, but keep it simple. In other words, the features that you really need to focus on. Okay, so simple, minimal, very, very similar. Okay, but lovability, this is where the framework changes slightly and goes on a slightly, different fork in the road. This is where you are including some of the creature comforts of the product, the more of a nice to have, this is cool aspect to the product. Okay, so you need to actually have a look at that. But again, going back to the first letter of this acronym, keep those lovabilities simple. Okay, don't include the fuzzy dice because you like them. Well, keep it sensible, keep it simple, but include that lovability aspect to the product itself. Go back to the can opener, the soft grip handles, for example. And then it's really that last aspect is completeness. This is where the MVP misses out, I think, in a lot of cases, is having that product complete the functionality, let's say, of what the true added value of the product is going to provide long term. Okay, and I think this is where the two separate, though. It's the lovability and the completeness is really, which I think sets the SLC framework apart from the MVP. Whereas the MVP really focuses on just a handful of features, and let's face it, the features may be exactly the same features which you're using in the SLC version, but the L and the C make it a little bit more of a rounded, more of a robust framework in order for the end user to feel more connected, let's say, with a product that's putting out there as a first off.
Yeah, it's potentially a bit more polished. That's how it's kind of striking me.
Nice way to put it. Nice way. Yeah.
Excellent.
And it's really adding real value to the customers and the way they would actually use it, as opposed to, like you said earlier, a little bit rough around the edges. So that's my take on the difference between MVP and the SLC frameworks.
Great. Thanks, Paul. So, let's throw it out to you guys who are listening. Yeah. Are you team MVP or SLC? Is this, if you've created an MVP in the past, how did that work out for you? Would you consider now thinking about, okay, when we are going through this process and trying to launch the product, maybe we kind of follow the SLC approach and just make those little tweaks to make it that little bit more lovable and complete, as you've said, Paul. So we'd love to hear from you. You know how to contact us by now. Go to the Sofeast website. There'll also be links in the show notes and links to some of the complimentary content to go along with this topic today. Paul, thanks very much for joining me. We'll get you on the podcast again soon, I'm quite sure. And to everybody listening, once again, we are in December, so happy holidays, and we'll be back next week. Thanks again for listening to this podcast, brought to you by the Sofeast Group. We're on a mission to provide you with everything you need to manufacture effectively in Asia, including inspections, auditing, new product development support, contract manufacturing, 3PL warehousing and fulfillment, and much, much more across Asia's key manufacturing areas. Visit us at sofeast.com, that's SOFEAST.com, to learn more and get help. If you've enjoyed the podcast today, please do rate, review and share, because it will really help others discover us too.